My name's Greg Knapp. This is the Greg Knapp Experience, your 20-minute thrill ride for your commute or your workout. Organized theft is up across the nation, and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez says it's not really happening. Threatening notes about gun violence at a school are made by the teacher? Biden lied about his own COVID test while adding new regulations for you to be tested when you fly internationally. New report on which states are most and least free. Where does your state stand? And while we're focused on our problems domestically, Biden is waiving sanctions on Iran. All that and more coming up in this hour of the Greg Knapp Experience, or really in this 20-minute thrill ride. It starts right now. Let's go. All right, so AOC has doubted the smash and grab crime sprees, these organized retail thefts. And here's what she said. In an interview last week with the Washington Times, quote, "A lot of these allegations of organized retail theft are not actually panning out. I believe it's a Walgreens in California that cited it, but the data didn't back it up." Wait, what? The data didn't back it up. Well, the data didn't back it up. Have you been watching the smash and grab videos that have been released? Have you talked to the people who live in the communities where the CVS has closed down because of so much shoplifting? Well, shoplifting, but not organized crime. Okay, right. She made the claim after scores of videos documented the rash of attacks by rampaging thieves, reports from big box stores across the country about the uptick in organized retail theft. Yeah, they get like 12, 14, 15, 20 people together. They all have drivers. They roll up, they run in, they smash and grab, they assault employees, and they're out. And in many places, no one gets arrested. In others, maybe one or two. In some places like California, they arrested a bunch of them and they were all released on bail again. Oh, wait, no bail, just on their own recognizance. It's just awesome. Walgreens said in a statement to the Washington Times, quote, "Organized retail crime is one of the top challenges the company is facing. The issue has evolved beyond shoplifting and petty theft to the sale of stolen and counterfeit goods online." Yeah, they're using online fences to do this now. The retail theft in Walgreens San Francisco stores has reached 5 times the chain average in the past few months. It's really not panning out. I think it is. In response, the company has increased security. The spending they've put in their own security has increased 46 times the average for Walgreens locations in San Francisco. Now, the LA police chief, Michael Moore, says the wave of organized retail theft began in early November in Chicago, New York, the Bay Area of California, and is now spreading to his cities and many others. So just from November 18 to the 28th, the city of LA had 11 of those types of crimes involving similar methods where groups of suspects working together work to steal from high-end clothing stores, often using weapons and physical force to overwhelm and intimidate store employees and other patrons. 14 people suspected in 11 attacks were arrested, but are out of custody, either as a result of being juvenile or bailing out or zero bail criteria. Retailers say the increase in incidents may be a result of changing laws and changing penalties for shoplifting. These people are getting smart. Yeah, well, I mean, who would have seen that coming except, oh, that's right, all of us. 3/4 of the retailers affected say these crimes have increased in the past 12 months. And more than 6 in 10 want a federal law to stop it. Well, you don't need a federal law. You need the cities and the states to enforce their laws and quit making the laws more lenient for people who are stealing. This is not rocket science. So we don't need to federalize local crime. We need to get people to elect the people who will actually enforce the law and not make it easier to steal. Many states have increased the threshold of what constitutes a felony, which has had the unintended consequence of allowing criminals to steal more without being afraid of stronger penalties. That's from the National Retail Foundation. I don't think they were unintended consequences. I think these were the intended consequences of the far left. They really don't care if you're punished for this because they don't think it's that big of a crime because, after all, these people needed this stuff. I mean, they have a really hard life. I mean, the workers are being exploited by these big businesses anyway. And hey, it's only property crime. And hey, they're insured. I mean, what is there really to worry about? It's really not that big a deal. And as the AOC points out, I don't think the data supports it. Oh, the data supports it. I don't think you know what the data is. I mean, just look at some of these headlines off Drudge. Violent crime shakes LA. Alarm grows over smash and grabs. Photographer robbed at gunpoint. Critics blame liberal justice reforms. No, I'm sure that has nothing to do with it. Oh, and you know what else I blame? I blame cities and communities that are trying to say it's the police's fault. It's the fault of the police. Case in point, Paul Sacker reporting on a San Francisco restaurant that denied service to 3 police officers. They came in, they sat down. They were in uniform, they were on duty. Yes, they had their sidearms. They sat down to eat breakfast at this place in San Francisco. Nope. They said, the eatery said, the owners of the Hilton Jesse restaurant, that their employees did not feel comfortable allowing the police officers to eat. The presence of the police officers. When pressed, they said, no, it wasn't the police officers. No, it was the fact that they had their weapons with them. Yeah. The police officers were seated, but shortly after, the staff felt uncomfortable with the presence of their multiple weapons and politely asked them to leave. We would like to politely ask you to leave because we hate cops. I mean, your weapons scare us. The owners had reportedly issued a response at first that said, our restaurant is a safe space, particularly for queer and BIPOC individuals. So are you saying that police make it so it's unsafe for queer and BIPOC individuals? What's BIPOC? Black, Indigenous, people of color. Who says that? No one except extremely far left liberals, because people who really are Black or Indigenous or people of color actually don't call themselves that. The owners, Christina Lydags Compton and Rachel Sillock, said the cops are welcome into the restaurant when they're off duty, out of uniform, and don't have a weapon. Oh, you mean when they hide their police officers, then they can come? Yes, that's exactly what they mean. Can't imagine why crime is up in San Francisco. Can't imagine it at all. Well, there was a backlash against the restaurant locally and nationally online, and so now they've come out and apologized again, but they haven't really said that you can come in with your weapons anymore. They just said, this is a teachable moment for us. Teachable about what? Well, we're not going to let it get out where people know what we did anymore. I mean, we're not going to do this anymore. I mean, well, we're just sorry. They didn't say whether they would be welcome next time if they had their uniforms on and their guns. Isn't that nice? Hey, in just a second, I'm going to tell you about a string of violent crimes committed by career offenders and how they're getting out of jail and what's a better idea than just saying don't worry about bail anymore. But if you're enjoying the show, I really need your help to be part of this movement, to push back on what the far left and the far left media are doing and rally around what makes America exceptional and make sure that we get this information out to people who are too busy living their lives to do what you and I are doing, which is paying attention. I mean, I get it. So if you would please like the Greg Knapp page, it's called the Greg Knapp Experience page on Facebook, and you're already listening to the podcast, please subscribe to it. Please like it. Please give it a review. And please tell 3 friends to tell 3 friends to listen to the podcast, wherever podcasts are, the Greg Knapp Experience podcast, so that we can really get this movement moving forward. Thanks so much. I can't tell you how much I appreciate that. So there has been a string of violent offenses, if you haven't noticed lately, and it turns out that the people who are doing them were out on bail or were just released on their own recognizance. And then you find out that they've got this lengthy criminal record, and you're saying, what is going on? There's a big piece by Paul Best where he goes through about 6, 7, 8 people that have done heinous crimes that were out on bail and should have been put in prison. And the far left is like, well, we can't keep people in prison. I mean, we just got to keep letting people out. Well, at some point, they need to stay in prison longer, because every time you let them out, they're committing a crime. And from the 90s all the way until about a couple years ago, we were seeing decreases in violent crime every year. Now it's going the other way, and it's coinciding with letting people out. And could it be that the people that commit crime after crime after crime after crime, if you keep letting them out, they're going to keep committing the crimes? I mean, I just spitballing here, but that might be part of the problem. So the recent arrest of Daryl Brooks, 39-year-old career criminal. He was out on $1,000 bail just days before he allegedly drove his SUV through that parade in Waukesha, Wisconsin, killing 6 people and injuring dozens of others. Well, he was arrested November 2nd for allegedly assaulting and running over the mother of his child with the same SUV. Then released on just $1,000 bail. Now remember, if you go to a bail bondsman, you only have to put up 10%, so he just had to put up $100, he's out. That was less than a week before he allegedly plowed through the Christmas parade. Just months before that, he was freed on $500 bail, which means it could be $50 for him, for allegedly firing a gun at his nephew. This guy's great. He's a convicted sex offender. He's got a lengthy criminal record dating back more than 2 decades, including charges for weapons offenses, assault, battery, drugs, bail jumping, and statutory rape. Well, we just can't keep people in prison with bail all the time. I mean, they could be innocent. You're right, they could be innocent. However, if they are a danger to society or a threat to abscond, that is why you set a bail very high or you don't let them out at all. And especially if you've been doing it over and over and over. Well, the left is saying things like, to require cash bail is to criminalize poverty. No. You could have a sliding scale fee. You could make it so it's just enough to hold the person around. You know, there's ways you could do this. Well, Andrew McCarthy is a former federal prosecutor. He wrote this great piece. He said a bail system should focus on the offense conduct alleged and personal history. So he says, Daryl Brooks Jr., we were just talking about, the Milwaukee County District Attorney released him on a ridiculously low bail. He says it's a mistake now. From not 1, but 2 pending violent crime cases. That's another big mistake. See, most criminals for whom bail is set at a dollar amount, too high for them to meet, are recidivists. So the reason they're setting it high is so they don't get out. Well, why do they set it at all? Just keep them in and say no bail. Well, because some states require that bail is set. The United States Constitution does not, but some states do require that. So look, these recidivists, there's usually strong evidence that they've committed serious crimes. They're career criminals who should not be released because of the high probability they will commit more crimes, or the high probability they won't show up for the court, or both. But we don't have to use these antiquated cash bail standards. There's a better solution. He said instead of financial means, a bail system should focus on the offense, conduct alleged, and personal history, particularly the defendant's criminal history and the salient question of whether, at the time of the alleged crime, the defendant was already on bail in connection with another offense, on probation or parole in connection with a prior conviction, an alien who either had no legal right to be in the country or whose alleged offense violated some condition of entry, or under some other legal restriction, such as a protective order. What he's saying is you look at these different things and decide, okay, because he's done A, B, C, D, he's not going to get bail. It's work for sentencing. We have legislative state guidelines that set up how long you stay in prison if you've committed offenses XYZ and you have a certain past. Said, because the problem was you had judges based on how they felt about crime giving out these very different sentences, and people were on the left were trying to say it was all about race. So in the federal system, defendants are now sentenced according to a formula. It weighs offense factors, violence, defendant's rank in a gang, weight of drugs, amount of fraud, on, and then they get a total offense level, and they use that to compute the range of imprisonment. So you could use the same system for bail. Remember, federal Constitution, there's no right to bail. The Eighth Amendment is a prohibition against excessive bail, but it doesn't say you have to have any bail. See, now the problem is when states require the courts to set bail, you've got someone they know they shouldn't let out, then they set the bail really, really high so that person can't get out. And so it makes it look like, well, that's discrimination. No, it's our way to hold you in because the state says we have to put some bail out there. Have you ever heard the mainstream media report that, by the way? No. All they say is, look at this excessive bail. Well, they don't want them out. So back to Andrew McCarthy said it's simple. If a defendant is a high risk to commit more crimes or flee, that defendant should be denied bail. If not, bail should be set at a level the defendant can meet. I totally agree with that. So now, if an offense is sufficiently serious, violent crimes that carry heavy sentences, a defendant was already under restrictions that we talked about, then there should be no bail set at all. Now, here's the dirty little secret McCarthy points out. The left, they hate transparency. See, when sentencing guidelines went into effect that we talked about earlier, they were attacked for being too severe by the left. Now, because the numbers don't lie, and faithful application of those guidelines results in higher sentences, and really tears away this idea that it's about race, they don't like it. And the same thing will probably happen with pretrial detention if you do exactly what we're just talking about here. More criminals will be denied bail because of the seriousness of their crimes and their criminal records. It would mean less crime, but that's not exactly what the left wants. And it would, by the way, take away the it's all about race argument with any kind of fact under it. I mean, they'll still make it, but you can point to what's actually happening. On the heels of the Michigan school shooting, that horrific school shooting, we go to Iowa. A high school teacher in Iowa arrested and charged with making terroristic threats. Wait, the teacher? Yeah. The teacher wrote the threatening notes about committing gun violence that were found at the school, many of them found in her own classroom. But don't worry, she was attempting to bring attention to the safety in schools, according to her and according to the police report. I mean, her heart was in the right place. It was all about protecting the kids. So it's okay that Katrina Phelan, 37, was doing this at her own high school. Each of the notes were reportedly either found in her classroom or found by herself in various locations within the school, according to the report. Once the threatening notes were discovered, the school increased security. The teacher penned threatening notes where she pretended to be a bullied student. She wrote the threatening notes out of concern, worry, and frustration over the lack of control of her classroom. Now, that's probably true. Have you been into a classroom just to observe lately? I mean, the kids are out of control in many of these schools and many of these classrooms because we have told teachers they can't discipline. The stuff that used to happen in my school when the teacher would just send you to the dean and the dean would have you an in-school suspension. If you were an out-of-school suspension, your parent had to come back with you in order to get back into school. You could be sent to a behavior specialist school if you misbehaved too much. You could be kicked out of the school if you misbehaved too much. There was after-school detention when you misbehaved. There was real punishment for you when you misbehaved. And if you didn't misbehave, there were a bunch of good things that happened to you. Now, you can't do anything. Greg, you can do something. Very little. I mean, I know a lot of teachers. My wife is a teacher, so I talk to a lot of teachers where kids are cussing them, throwing things at them, tearing up the classroom. Oh, we can't touch the child. What do you mean you can't touch the child? He's a little kid. Scoop him up and tell him to stop. Nope, can't do that. We can't put him in school suspension. We can't make him stay after school. We can't. If we send him home, it's just a reward. We don't. So what do you do? Well, we put him in a safe space. I'm not making this stuff up, man. So look, what we are doing right now, the Michigan student that shot up the school, that guy was a behavior problem. In fact, the staff said he exhibited warning signs of violence and needed counseling. They were already meeting with the parents. The problem is what we are doing right now. Common sense discipline is gone in our schools. We're rewarding bad behavior. We're helping create these future killers. We've got to stop behavior problems when they're young and get the severe problems out to the special classrooms and the special schools in order to protect the kids who are behaving well. Otherwise, man, we're going to see a lot more of this, and it makes it really hard for the good kids to enjoy school. Hey, if I would love to hear from you, by the way, if you've got stories like this. My email is greg@gregorybknapp.com. I would love to hear from you. I've got an update for COVID. Joe Biden has increased the requirement for getting a COVID test before you get on a plane. But, only international flights. Yeah, here's what it is. You're going to have a COVID-19 negative test 24 hours before international flights. It starts now. All travelers, regardless of vaccination or citizenship status, will be subject to the changed regulation. Okay, so it's okay for you to fly around America if you've got COVID because we're not going to test. But if you fly away and then come back, we're going to test you both times because that's, All right. The plan also calls for insurers to pay 100% of the cost of the in-home testing kits, and they will provide it for free for those who do not have private insurance. So wait a second. So we're just going to tell these insurance companies, hey, you got to pay for this for everybody all the time, whenever they want one? Where are the insurance companies going to get the money? It's just magic money, Greg. It doesn't matter. They have a lot of money. They're exploiting people. And I'm sure that's not going to increase our insurance costs at all. No. Previously, only the unvaccinated were required to show a negative test 24 hours prior to departure on an international flight. Those that were vaccinated had to show a negative test within 72 hours. Now everybody has to. Thank you, Joe. Meanwhile, while Joe's making you take more tests, he's lying about getting his own test. Nicarama pointing out, Biden was asked by Peter Doocy on Fox what was wrong because Biden appeared sick. He had a frog in his throat. He seemed clogged up. And Biden claimed, I have a test every day to see, a COVID test. They check me for all the strains. He claimed he caught a cold from kissing his grandson. The White House, though, came out and said, well, no, he's not tested every day. He's been tested 3 times this week after he started having the COVID-like symptoms. What? He lied? No, he didn't lie. He's a little forgetful now. He thought he got tested all the time. I mean, it's really not. He lied. Yeah, okay, he lied. Then then Jen Psaki said from the White House press corps, Biden would not be tested. Sorry, White House spokesperson. I apologize. Psaki said Biden would not be tested daily and was just taking some cold medication for the symptoms. I'm sure there's nothing wrong with Joe Biden's mental state at all. John Brown is reporting on the Oregon Health Authority. See, they have assembled a rules advisory committee, and they want to address a permanent indoor mask mandate in the state. Permanent? Yep, permanent indoor mask mandate in the state. They still have one going on right now, and they're talking about making it permanent. Dr. Paul Sislak, the medical director for communicable disease and immunizations with the Oregon Health Authority, explained to channel KATU that the potential permanent mask mandate is not necessarily permanent. Wait, what? Isn't permanent permanent? No, permanent is not necessarily permanent because it can be repealed. Can't everything be repealed? Well, yeah. I mean, so nothing's permanent? Right. So why are they calling it permanent? I don't know. Well, actually, I do know. Here's what he's saying. Permanent means indefinite. It doesn't necessarily mean permanent. We can repeal it as well, but we are only allowed to have a temporary rule for 180 days, and anything that goes beyond 180 days, we cannot extend it. So here's what he's really saying. It's a pain in the butt for us to have to redo the mask mandate every 180 days because people get mad and people say we shouldn't do it, and it's a big debate and hullabaloo, and every time we have to convince everybody that it's time to have the mask mandate, well, we don't really convince them, we just do it. But it's just a pain, and we'd rather just have it be a permanent mask mandate, and then we don't have to keep renewing it, and then it's easier to just keep it, and people just forget about it after a while, and we just have a mask mandate. No, it should be something you have to renew every 180 days for good reason, because you should not have a mask mandate. You should not ever make it easy to force people to wear masks. But hey, Oregon, you get the government that you deserve, man. Are you going to do anything about it? You going to tell them no? You're going to elect new people, or are you just going to sit back? Oh, well, I guess we got a permanent mask mandate. It's not really permanent. The public will be permitted, though, to offer comment when the Oregon Health Authority proposes the indoor mask rule formally. Isn't that nice? I mean, they're gonna let you comment. Well, they're not going to really listen to you or let it change their mind, but they're going to let you comment publicly. Other health experts, such as Johns Hopkins professor Marty Makary, has spoken against the indefinite mask mandates. We may have a baseline rate of COVID cases hovering around where they are now in the Southeast forever. We are entering an endemic phase, and the question we need to ask as a society, do we want a perpetual society with people masked? Bingo. I don't know about you, I want some freedom. Speaking of freedom, the Cato Institute has their Freedom in the 50 States survey out again. They do this every year. They're a libertarian organization, and they found that New York is the least free state, shocker, followed closely by Hawaii and California. The freest state is New Hampshire, followed by Florida and Nevada. This is very much a blue-red thing. They looked at a combination of personal and economic freedoms, 230 different metrics, things like taxation, debt, eminent domain laws, occupational licensing, drug policy, educational choice. New York's been the least free for a very long time. The bluer your state is, it seems, the less free it is. Do you care about freedom? And you'll see that there are a lot of people who are starting to say yes, and they're starting to move to these more free states. I just hope they don't bring their politics with them. I'm in one of the freest states in the union, according to this survey. I would love for you to come, as long as you don't start electing people who are going to take that freedom away. Speaking of that, it may be changing in some of these blue states. Let's go, Brandon. You know that phrase. Let's go, Brandon. You know, making fun of President Biden because it's really, it started with the F. Joe Biden chant, and the reporter said, you can hear them chanting, let's go, Brandon. You know the story. So it's a very polite way to say that you're not very happy with Joe Biden. Well, there's a store now selling products with Let's Go Brandon all over them. Hats, t-shirts, stickers, signs. I mean, they're on the internet. But this is a brick and mortar store with a big sign out front that says Let's Go Brandon. That's what it's all about. And inside they have signs for sale that say things like, when I die, don't let me vote Democrat. And the Second Amendment is my gun permit. Now, that's funny. And it's in Massachusetts. This store is not in Texas. This store is not in Florida. This store is in Massachusetts, and it's selling like hotcakes. Wow. John Rigolizzo has a little piece about the tax cuts. You remember Trump's tax cuts and the Republican tax cuts in 2017? It was called the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. And the Democrats came out and they said, I can't believe, look at what they're doing. Here's a little bit from Nancy Pelosi back when it was first put into play. Despite Republicans' empty promises to cut taxes for middle-class working families, it's clear that the Republican tax plan for the wealthiest is rich indeed. The truth is already catching up with the Republican snake oil pitch. Instead of pushing a deficit-exploding handout to corporations and the wealthy that increases tax on millions of hardworking families, Republicans must join Democrats to work on bipartisan tax reform that puts the middle class first. I mean, Nancy Pelosi, oh man, she couldn't believe these Republicans. Well, here's the report from the Heartland Institute looking at the tax reform law and what actually happened to it. And they found that the tax cuts benefited the American middle and working classes the most, made the tax code even more progressive, where the upper level income earners are paying even a higher percentage share of the tax cuts. Of the taxes. This happens every time we cut taxes across the board. When you cut income taxes across the board, from Coolidge to JFK to Reagan to George W. Bush to Trump, every single time, if you track it, we've had an increase in tax revenue because the economy has increased, and we've had an increase in the amount that the upper crust is paying in income taxes. And there's only so much you can cut the lower income taxes, but they did it. If you look at percentages, the lower incomes got the best tax cuts. If you earn between 40 and 50 grand, you got an 18.2% tax cut from 2017 to 2018. If you earn 50 to 75 grand, you got a 17% tax cut. If you earn between $30,000 and $40,000 a year, you got an 18.41% tax cut. If you earned, though, just a little, between 5 and 10 grand a year, you had an 87% tax cut. Wow. Now, if you were a big earner, 5 to 10 million a year, you only got a 3.5% tax cut. Yeah, but the amount was bigger there because you make so much more money. Of course, if you pay $1 million in taxes and you get a 3% cut, that's a $300,000 cut. See? Yeah, but you're already paying $1 million in taxes. You can't. That's why it's about percentages. The report, I mean, if you don't pay any tax, it's kind of hard to cut your taxes. This isn't rocket science here. The income earners, the high income earners, increase their share of the tax burden. Yep, happens every time. And finally, as we're being, focused on domestic problems in America, which of course we should, we sometimes miss what's going on internationally. The Washington Free Beacon reporting that the Biden administration has quietly waived sanctions on Iran to allow them to sell electricity to Iraq. That's according to a non-public notification that Washington Free Beacon was able to obtain. It was provided to Congress 10 days after the Biden administration did it. The day nuclear negotiations with Iran resumed. You're about to go into nuclear negotiations with Iran and you already give away one of your big cards. You waive the sanctions on electricity. Does that make any sense? Brigadier General from Iran, Abolfazl Shekarchi, I'm sure I'm pronouncing that correctly, designated spokesman for Iran, insisted that Iran would never back off on the annihilation of Israel. This is while the news is coming out that we've waived some sanctions. Never back off on the annihilation of Israel. The sanctions relief Iran was demanding was not in exchange for any concessions regarding its nuclear weapons program. No. That concession that Biden gave them was just for their agreement to actually talk about the program. Wow. So this is how Biden supposedly wins back allies, supposedly makes it so that our enemies fear us, is by doing this. Iran nukes are on the way if we keep negotiating like this. And it looks like the Biden administration will do nothing of substance to stop it. Did you hear this reported anywhere? My name's Greg Knapp. This is the Greg Knapp Experience.